Hi, this is Erik Lundquist, and we're super excited about our guest today. A good friend of mine, Jeff Glad, we met, 15 years ago or so, and super excited about you guys to hear him share his story today. Davin, what were some of the lessons you learned from today?
I just loved hearing all along the way where he would just, have an idea and, try to solve a problem, start a company to do that. And it's led him to where he is today. And I think just a beautiful balance between, serving in that capacity, trying to take what he's learned and impact, millions of patients through, helping thousands and thousands of doctors, but not giving up on the patient care side, which I think is awesome and lends him a lot of credibility.
At the end, he shares where he sees the future of functional medicine going and some of the market trends. So you'll be excited to hear this podcast today, and we're glad you're joining us.
You don't want to miss this one. It's a good one.
Welcome to the Root Cause Business of Medicine podcast, where we explore what's broken in healthcare and what we can do about it. I'm Dr. Erik Lundquist, and I've been practicing functional medicine for the past 15 to 20 years. I'm excited to co-host this podcast with my brother, Dr. Davin Lundquist,
who's just beginning his journey into functional medicine. We come from different points on the path, but we do share a common goal. We want to rethink how medicine is practiced and help others do the same.
The U.S. healthcare system is in crisis, rising costs, declining outcomes, and physician burnout at an all-time high. But we found a different way, another way, a better way.
On this podcast, we dive into real stories from medical professionals who've stepped away from the traditional model, kind of like me, and have found a new purpose in integrative, functional, and alternative approaches to care.
These are authentic conversations with practitioners and friends who've redefined success, not just for themselves, but for their patients and communities.
Whether you're a clinician feeling stuck, a student seeking direction, or just curious about what is possible,
you're in the right place. This is the Root Cause Business of Medicine podcast. All right, welcome to another episode of the Root Cause Business of Medicine podcast, where the first step is always the hardest. And today our guest is Dr. Jeff Glad, who we are super excited to have on. Jeff and I go way back. There was a forum called Heal Thy Practice, which is where I first heard Jeff's story, and where I was in the process of trying to figure out my story from an integrative and functional medicine practitioner and how I was going to set up my practice. And that was a great learning point for me. And Jeff's been a great inspiration, and we've been friends ever since. So I'm really excited to hear you today. And why don't you give us kind of a little bit of where you are right now, what you're kind of doing, and then back that up and give us the story of how you went from being a family medicine doc and practicing allopathic medicine and jumped ship out of that into the integrative fellowship with Dr. Weil and going from there.
Yeah, no, happy to share that and great to be with you two, as always. Always miss being together at conferences, but this will have to do for now. So currently, I am the Chief Medical Officer at FullScript. I've been in that role since 2019. And I love every week at FullScript because I provide a lot of oversight, guidance, consultation to nearly every team. I think the only part of FullScript I don't touch directly on a weekly basis is the distribution centers, which don't need my help or guidance. They're doing a great job on their own. I still maintain a practice, so we'll obviously get into the practice I started. I'm still in that today. It'll be 15 years. Actually, it was 15 years August 1st. And so I still see patients about 2 half days a week. When I went full time with FullScript, I sort of carved out the patients that I enjoyed working with the most, that I had been taking care of for years, and really didn't want to give up clinical practice, and still don't. and was able to bring in another provider to take the bulk of the work that I was doing with patients. But if I go back to the beginning, so to your point, I trained and did the very fast, college, med school, residency, get to work, no breaks in between. Came out of residency that really inspired wanting to do everything a family doctor was capable of doing. So I came to the town I still live in, Columbia City, Indiana, and started a solo practice, delivered babies, colonoscopies and EGDs, inpatient care, ER shifts, did the full spectrum. And within about a year and a half, 2 years, was now I can look back and say was clearly on the edge of burnout. Certainly, I wasn't measuring labs in the way I work with patients today, so was probably pre-diabetic, if not, type 2 diabetic. And my daughter, who turned 19 earlier this year, was really the inspiration, our second child. And I just said, something's got to change. I've got to do something different. I don't feel well. I was still taking SSRIs out of the drug rep closet to manage panic attacks that I had since medical school. And just sort of looking in the mirror, like this isn't good for me, and it's not going to end well. And really just took steps toward cleaning up the diet, which at that time to me, coming through medical school, nutrition training, all 15 minutes of it meant, drinking Diet Coke instead of regular Coke. And, really just sort of a calorie cutting focus. Lost 50 pounds, felt amazing, was able to get off of the SSRIs slowly, but successfully, and sort of sat there realizing I spent nothing I learned in 7 years of medical school and residency to reverse my health. And opened up the book, Michael Pollan's Omnivore's Dilemma, and realized that the nutrition path that got me success wasn't really great nutrition anyway. And there's a whole nother level to sort of, access and open up. And so started to implement that for my young family, myself. My wife was already a relatively healthy eater, but, just started to change the focus around the house. And funny enough, I was following Michael Pollan, and he was speaking at an event in San Diego that fall, which was the exact week that the American Academy of Family Physicians conference was going on. And I was already registered, right? You got CME. At the time, I had left solo practice, joined the hospital, the burden of malpractice for obstetrics. And, financially, I was completely ignorant, as most medical students and doctors are, how to run a practice, how to run a business. And I was, was literally drowning in that process. And so I had joined the hospital system, shortly during this transition, was signed up to use my CME money for the AAFP conference. And I just told my wife, I feel like I need to go listen to Michael Pollan speak. Canceled that conference and went to go hear Michael Pollan speak. Well, lo and behold, it was Dr. Weil's Arizona Integrative Medicine Fellowship Nutrition Conference. And so really, Michael Pollan was not the star of the show for me. It was everybody else speaking about integrative medicine, bringing nutrition into practice, bringing mindfulness into practice, ultimately what we call now at Fullscript whole person care. And I left that conference on fire. I mean, I literally typed out an op-ed for the local newspaper on the farm bill and how we clean up nutrition, went to the hospital, that next week and said, I really want to open an integrative practice. I had applied to the fellowship on the flight home. And so literally just caught fire for seeing this new path of medicine, and that there was a structure for the education and the understanding to do it. The hospital was very open-minded, and they said, hey, let's give it a try, but you're not going to give up your day job. You do conventional family practice 3 days a week, and we'll open up this integrated medical center 2 days a week. And just in a short time, in a couple months, word got out. The hospital helped with the marketing to the community at that time. I was doing a live call-in show on the ABC affiliate on whole person care and integrative medicine, and just taking live questions from the audience. And the clinic got incredibly busy.
Was this before you had completed this was just all after the conference? You hadn't even got to the fellowship. You were a born again integrative medicine physician at that point. You were evangelizing integrative medicine in every manner and media possible.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, even just basic understanding is such a radical change in the paradigm in how you work with a patient and talk to a patient that I felt strongly enough that that focus and that paradigm shift, that's really integrative medicine. It wasn't what tests to run. It wasn't, how to interpret labs. It was literally just talking to patients, asking them what they ate for breakfast, how they slept. And so I felt strongly enough to then, go to the hospital. Let's open the practice. I actually opened the practice, I think right before I actually started the fellowship. So I was sort of learning and practicing at the same time. And that, in a couple months of that hospital 2 day a week, it was clear that the demand from the patient side was huge. They let me give up my primary care practice and only focus on integrative medicine. I had hired a behavioral psychologist to work in the practice with me, doing a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy and behavioral change focus. One of the hospital dietitians saw me on the news and immediately reached out and said, I want to leave the dietitian practice in the hospital and join your practice. She came over. So I was sort of building this collaborative team on the fly just because of, such a unique presentation to how to work with patients. That went about a year and a half of success from a patient interest perspective. But again, not being a great business person and understanding the practice of medicine and just saying, well, let's bill insurance for these hour-long visits. The hospital came knocking about a year and a half in and said, Jeff, we love what you do. We appreciate you have a 6-month waiting list. We need you to see 3 times as many patients. And at that point, I had already been, I'd been to Heal Thy Practice as an attendee. The one we met was the next year after I started the practice I'm in today and was telling that story, and we hit it off right away. But I went to the Heal Thy Practice conference to help build a better business model for the hospital integrative center. And what I walked away with that conference was my dream practice. I now know how I want to practice medicine for the future. I want to, build it on the relationships that I have with friends and family that I'm taking care of by text message and email and be available to them. And I want to create this sort of high tech, high touch practice experience. And so that was sitting on the back burner. And when the hospital came and said, can you see 3 times as many people? I knew the demand in Fort Wayne was there. And I'd already had the vision for what this practice looked like. And I said, no, I'm just going to spin off and have my own practice. At the time, that was a very amicable breakup, to the point where I rented my hospital office space to start my integrative practice. Today, had I done that, I would have had to move 2 hours away to practice for 2 years, right? Or do only telemedicine from 2 hours away. But it was such a blessing, to not be in that environment yet, and just be in that same space, a very low overhead practice because they didn't charge me a ton for rent. And then a year later, we had enough of a buildup and enough of a following to now move out into the office space that we've been in for 14 years. When I started GladMD, again, that was that vision of this high touch, high tech practice. I brought my wife over, who's a nurse practitioner, to start seeing patients and being a provider for us. She just learned by osmosis from me, like just walking through everything, and the content that I was learning was, kind of rubbing off on her. Brought another nurse practitioner who was passionate about integrative medicine. And so we started that practice in 2010. And, I think, we'll talk about some of the ways we started that practice and messaged that practice and grew that practice. But that continues to be a very successful practice 15 years later. I think I spend $0 on marketing for the last 10 years. It's all word of mouth, and we still see 25 to 35 new patients a week. And that's, again, bringing on a doctor to largely take my practice panel. And I'm only there a couple half days a week.
That's incredible.
I have, having started this journey much later than you guys, and also I think in a state here in Southern California where people tend to maybe be a little more on the front edge of some of these, healthier, lifestyle choices. I'm really curious, that many years ago in your, where you did this practice, maybe you could just walk us through a little bit about, obviously, were you like the only person? Was there some resistance? Were people like, you're crazy? Like, I don't know, just give us a sense for like the reception or it's obviously sounds like a great story, but there had to have been some some adversity too in there, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there was, to your point, I mean, it really was one of the reasons why I started it with the hospital. I mean, I was already employed, had benefits, was locked in there. But looking back, the benefit of being able to utilize them in partnership to sort of present myself in the community, that was massive. And what I learned, the more I went out and did talks and met with different groups around the community and gave a talk at the food co-op, whether you're in Southern California or New York or Fort Wayne, Indiana, patients want better care. They want their doctor to talk to them about nutrition. Not all of them, but lots of patients want want to have a relationship with their provider. And so that was sort of the aha in that year and a half window as hospital physician, is like, oh wow, this can absolutely happen in Fort Wayne. There were one or two, sort of integrative, focused doctors that had very tiny practices. And that was, you could kind of see that was largely word of mouth too. They weren't on billboards. They weren't out there talking. And so sort of younger, energetic, out in the community, on the television show, it just sort of really pulled a lot of patient interest. And you sort of saw it outside of Fort Wayne, right? Now, friends and family members from, communities that drive 2 hours still drive 2 hours to Fort Wayne. And so I would say that the most pushback and adversity I had was my family members to go out and build a practice that people would pay cash for. That was unheard of. And that was really the resistance. And that was the only thing that was in the back of my mind, is like, okay, is this the right thing? Is this going to work? And then I finally realized, like, well, wait a minute, they're all getting my care for free. So of course they're not going to pay for it. And nor can they see anybody else paying for it. But yet all the patients coming in, we're happily paying for it. And I continue to stand on, we save patients tens of thousands of dollars a year by not just the care we provide. You sort of think about it as a value-based care sort of, relationship with them. But, we offer low-cost cash labs, right? We're saving patients thousands of dollars on lab testing that they think their insurance covers. Then they get the bill after their high deductible gets tagged, and it's thousands of dollars. Well, we can do that for a couple $100s. We were one of the, I think, probably one of the first practices using GoodRx with our patients side by side, printing out the coupons for them because they can save money on their prescriptions significantly. Almost every visit, when there's an imaging test that we're going to order, I'm going to MD Save to find the cash rates. We had a GI doctor 2 hours away that did cash colonoscopy and EGD. So, like, not only was it the care model and that paradigm of health promotion, but it was also like, okay, let me put my healthcare financial hat on and help you save money through this journey. And patients appreciate that, right? And they see the value of that investment.
Was there a moment though? So here you were practicing in the very familiar state of insurance-based medicine with the hospital. You had, you had your insurance coverage through that. You had probably some 401k. You had, here's your financial stability, right? Is kind of tied into all of that. Now you're saying, all right, they want me to see more patients. I can't do that. That was where really the crux of it broke for you in terms of being able to continue that relationship. I'm guessing they gave you a salary and then they were looking at your productivity and RVUs and saying, we're overpaying you for what revenue you're bringing in. But did you think at that point, should I continue doing insurance and bill out for, and then maybe charge cash for some of the additional things you were doing? How did you get to the point where you said, okay, cash is for me for sure?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I never considered anything but just a straight cash practice. And again, that would going back to that holistic primary care conference and hearing practitioners that had built practices that were successful, that had done this. I felt confident that was the way to go. And just to, and through that, had to learn salesmanship and how to talk to patients about money. And I spent a lot of time in the last 6 months in the hospital, talking to my patients about the upcoming transition. I understand this isn't for everybody, but I feel really passionate about this. For me to keep, spending this much time with patients, I'm just going to have to leave the insurance world. The only fear that, I sort of drove me to create a backup plan. I mean, my backup plan, and I tell practitioners this all the time, I still get primary care job offers on postcards, 5, 10 a week. We all do. And so I just knew, and that was kind of how I framed it to my wife, because we had to make this decision. Like, listen, the backup plan is pretty safe. And because there's still non-competes, that don't really exist strongly, I could go back to the hospital system. But certainly I'm going to land with a successful primary care job and go back to insurance. I might not love it, and I may try again in a couple of years. But that was always my backup plan. I think for practitioners today who are on this, like, can't take that jump, won't take that risk, very scared, completely get it. And it's not for everybody. But now, I guide practitioners to say, like, if this is what you're passionate about, now you have really elegant backup plans. I mean, you could just sort of be jump into the gig economy and get 3 telemedicine roles, be really busy, can, maintain your same income while you're growing this practice, and you don't have that non-compete hanging over your head, limiting you from where you can practice and when.
No, that's a great point. I think, I can relate to that, having, taken the leap a year and a half ago and leaving a large, healthcare system, practice. I was fortunate to have a part-time, job with a tech company as well, right? So I think all of us kind of have our unique way of sort of insulating the transition. But yeah, to your point, I think as there continues to be, and I think maybe this could be a thread in our discussion at some point, maybe not today, but the shortage of primary care. And I think what's interesting is, I wonder if they were to sort of remodel the shortage with, integrative medicine and whole person care, as you've described it, more at the center of how we approach, primary care even. And I wonder if we'd have the same shortage, as people started getting healthier potentially. But yeah, there is a nice fallback for people.
Well, and I think that sort of gig economy environment is why we're losing so many primary care doctors, right? That 40 patients a day model just isn't sustainable for a very select number of practitioners that you probably don't want to trade lives with. They can do it, but they see these opportunities too, and they're all moving into this, like, well, I can work out of my basement now and see patients virtually for 10 or 15 minutes and write the GLP-1 prescription. I mean, so it is weakening that piece. But
yeah.
I do think, at some level would love to make primary care more sexy and arm them with more ability to kind of have these conversations. And is it group visits and community visits? I mean, there's all kinds of models out there that allow a successful practice to stay on insurance and see more patients.
You talk about, in the beginning, you were trying to make some of the ancillary services a little more affordable for people. Would you be able to describe, did you see yourself more closer aligned to like a direct primary care kind of model, or were you more concierge, or were you just more like program based for, like, pay for what you're kind of getting? Maybe talk to us a little bit about that if you don't mind.
Yeah, and maybe
Yeah,
I'll
no,
just
not
add
at all.
on to that, Jeff, real quick. And then what? How did you settle in on how much you were charging? Right. So, what were you charging patients? Whether it be a la carte or membership or stuff. I just kind of walk us through, because I think that's really helpful for people listening as they're trying to figure this out, that transition, that you were literally kind of paving the way. Like, you didn't have a bona fide structure that was just plopped into, and you say, oh, I'm going to plug and play this. And then, wow, look, this works great.
Yeah, no, that was a lot of the, again, my time at the Holistic Primary Care Conference and coming out of that and sort of outlining how to set up a practice, what a P&L statement was, and how to outline that. I mean, now I would have ChatGPT do it and be done in seconds. This was weeks on end of working in spreadsheets. But, there's a couple of things that led me to the way we structured the practice. At the same time that I was in that hospital practice for integrative medicine, I was really close friends with Dr. Winley, who's still practicing integrative medicine with a health system in Southern Indiana. Steve came to our residency center and got them to open an acupuncture clinic inside of the family practice residency. Like, he was integrative before I even knew what that meant. And I didn't believe any of it, right? But like, his supplement recommendations, don't get it. They don't work. The acupuncture is super weird. I don't get it.
That's
Well,
so
all of a
funny.
sudden my mind's open, and Steve and I had been good friends ever since. But then I'm like, hey, like, I get it. Like, I'm in. And we had another buddy who was an SEO guy at the time, and knew how to get all your page ranks up on Google. So we started a .com for this content and this education. So purehealthmd.com was what we launched 2009. And the model there was, as I'm meeting all these people in the fellowship and at these conferences, we got them to author and write papers on magnesium or nutrition or different conditions. And then we'd make sure that their bio showed up, the article showed up at the top of Google for those searches, their bios there, links to their clinic. I loved that startup culture. I loved being in tech. And those two guys couldn't give more time to it. I was still sort of in the place where I could. And so we ultimately ended up selling that to the Discovery Channel. That was not a huge exit. So I still had backup plans, Gavin, upon backup plans. But what I got was a taste for, tech and startup culture and being an entrepreneur. So when I launched GladMD, I refused to be primary care. I did not want to make a commitment to patients that if I was going to be primary care, that's a long-term commitment. And I knew I wanted to dabble in other technologies. I wanted to, see what else was out there. So then it had to be a consultative practice. And I knew it was going to be built on cash. To your question, Erik, about how we structure the pricing, again, that was a P&L exercise, right? If I see this many patients, this is my overhead, this is my rent, this is what I pay for an accountant, this is the bills, this is purchasing the supplements. How much do I need to charge per hour to break even? And then how much do I want to make? And ultimately, that's where we landed on a price. And I would encourage all practitioners to do the same thing and don't outprice yourself to start. We've raised prices over the last 15 years 4 times. And I don't think we've lost, but a handful of patients through that transition. So again, to get started, what do you need to be comfortable, get your bills paid, be able to do the things you want to do, to take some time off for sure. But that's how I structured the pricing. I intentionally, from the outset, billed less for the nurse practitioner visits than for my visits. And again, looking back, that's a model that was wildly successful because what I found was patients wanted to come see me, right? I'm the one in the community. I'm the one giving the talks. And I needed almost to have a 6 to 8 month or 6 to 8 week waiting list. And then they'd see the nurse practitioner. So price didn't make that big of a difference, but it was a softer landing for them. And then as they met the nurse practitioner, saw they were trained, saw they could deliver the same level of care, they've now built their own brands. Patients are now, calling to see them specifically. The price discrepancy still exists. I don't think it has to in a model like mine, but we still do that to try to keep it, relatively accessible to more patients. But ultimately, that was, kind of why I structured it as consultative. And then ultimately, that allowed me to spend time working on Midavin.com. So I built a medication-induced nutrient depletion calculator in 2012. Heard Tironi Low Dog speak at a conference on medication-induced nutrient depletion. I'm like, gosh, that's ripe for a tool to be used to practice really simply. And so had a project manager, hired a database guy. We built it. And again, not a great business person at the time. So launched it as a labor of love. Hey, maybe on the back end, we'll sell supplements someday. But that got the attention of the Functional Forum and James Maskell. And then I spoke at a couple conferences on that exact topic in the platform. And then Kyle Bratz in 2014, who's the co-founder and CEO of FullScript, reached out to me. Is like, I just heard about Midavin. I love it. Let's connect. And that was my FullScript relationship. Started those early days and continues to be, my passion.
That's awesome. I love that you recognize that along this journey, that your entrepreneurial side could start to flourish, right? I like you, I don't think I realized going into medical school that I had an entrepreneurial spirit, right? That was something that would drive me into the path that I have had. And it's created a lot of fun and creative opportunities because of that I wouldn't have had just practicing medicine. And I think there's nothing wrong with just practicing medicine, because there's a lot of good and there's a lot of fulfillment just in that. But I think that there's a challenge in today's market if you are just practicing medicine. Even if you go into integrative and functional medicine, you get the knowledge. I think there's a challenge of just practicing medicine and being able to make a living. And so I think this transition where people get excited, they have that aha moment like you did, like I've had and Davin have had, where I'm not satisfied practicing medicine this way anymore. I want to practice this way. Feels more complete for me, more fulfilling. I feel like I'm actually making the changes with my patients that I went to school for. But now I don't know how to make money doing it. Right. So what thoughts would you have in sharing with individuals who don't have that entrepreneurial mindset? How do they go out and use their integrative and functional medicine knowledge now and passion to earn a living?
Yeah, well, I would encourage all of us, everyone listening, and you two are good examples of this, like to keep your hand in working one-on-one with patients. To Davin's point, we don't have enough providers. And it still makes each of us, regardless of the path you take, better at other roles that you're in, right? To understand what patients are reading, well, now what they're seeing on their phones, what they're asking, that gives me so much more value in my role at FullScript than if I were only in an office sitting in this basement on the computer all day long. So it should always maintain some level of patient care. But I do think, if certainly some have the entrepreneurial spirit, some legitimately just want to be clinicians. That's awesome. We need more of them. But I would still challenge them to think about, how do you scale what you're doing to inspire more clinicians, and have them kind of change toward our way of thinking about this whole person care paradigm shift. That's what has me most passionate about FullScript. That's why I wake up every morning like, we're powering more and more clinicians to deliver this kind of care. I can't do that in Fort Wayne, Indiana, seeing patients one at a time. I still do it because of what I just said, but how now do we grow tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of clinicians, and maybe not just in the US, globally, to think like this? Because they're still not getting it in medical school. They're certainly not getting it in residency. And so, how can you share what you've learned to other clinicians? How can you bring clinicians under your wing and have them see patients for you if you want to cut back a little bit? But I think that's really the key. I also, continued, and my kids now, I'm seeing it happen with them. Like the one rule I always had, as I started to become more of an entrepreneur, don't turn down a meeting, right? You get hit up on LinkedIn, you get an email, you get a phone call, regardless of what it is, like take the meeting, because opportunities are literally going to come to your doorstep when you're doing something unique. It may be a local business. It may be a local employer who wants you all of a sudden to be the employer, physician for that community. Like there's just so many opportunities because we're still incredibly unique in the way we think about care. And there's a huge opportunity there, whether you're a clinician or quasi-clinician or entrepreneur.
I love that, Jeff. I think when I look back to my years as a CMIO with a large health system, right? It started out as accepting an invitation to a meeting, way back when, the local health system that I worked for at the time was evaluating which EMR to pick to move from paper to an EHR, right? And I was the only doctor who showed up from our health system to that meeting.
That's awesome.
And so, inadvertently volunteered to be the physician champion, right? And, again, grew into a role. But I think, I've heard already in this short amount of time, as you've told your story, a similar experience, which is your early entrepreneurial experience came from seeing a problem or a pain point that you felt needed a solution, right? And, and so I think, the world has changed, right? We're not in the same, situation technologically that we were, 15 years ago.
5 months ago.
5 months. Yeah. It's going fast. It's going fast. But there are still pain points, and there are still problems, and there are still opportunities that need better solutions. And I think, it sounds like you would agree with this, but encouraging people to say, hey, is there something that gets you excited? Is there a problem you're excited to solve? And rather than think, I need to be an entrepreneur to solve it, don't think like that. Just say, hey, how can I help solve this problem? And then to your point, there will probably be others who will gravitate to that energy and help you.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. And I would say even on the other side of that, right? Always take the meeting, always take the invite. You never know where it's going to land. But if you see, clinicians or entrepreneurs doing something that you think is interesting and exciting, I mean, reach out to them, right? They're probably looking for like-minded people. That's what when we're hiring at FullScript, I want more people who know U.S. healthcare. I mean, yes, we're a Canadian business, but 98% of our business in the U.S. But the folks in Canada don't understand U.S. healthcare, and that's a completely different animal. So we've committed to bringing more people on who have that mindset, and certainly those that would reach out, that becomes an opportunity. So learn from those folks, reach out. I think what you guys are doing with this podcast is incredible, because I'm sure it's, every clinician has a completely different journey, a completely different story. And there's different parts of that you can pull from and sort of shape your own vision for where you want to go.
I think that's great. Speak a little bit to the salesman aspect of it. In terms of your success, right? I think I remember even with selling supplements in our clinic when we were kind of approached with doing that, I initially felt a little uncomfortable because I didn't want to unduly influence my patients to purchase something from my clinic. Then I felt like maybe they would feel obligated because I was their practitioner. But I think just speak a little bit, one, to the salesmanship of your practice from I'm getting started, and so I need to go out and sell my practice, to also selling your type of practice, which includes selling supplements, or getting them to see the nutritionist, or even to see the nurse practitioner. Like, how do you go about doing that in a way that you feel is ethical, you feel comfortable with, and you actually feel like is benefiting the patient overall?
Yeah, I think the last thing you said is, like, you have to feel incredibly passionate that what you're providing is the best thing for that patient, for the patient, not because I want to make a bunch of money. And I always like the best salesman. We've all met salespeople, right? And there are salespeople you like, and that you can see, like, okay, this is a relationship, and they're going to be honest with me. And there's salespeople that turn you off immediately, and there's no way you're going to purchase that. So, like, to me, honesty and transparency is really the only way to sell. And so, when I get up and I was promoting my practice and giving talks around the community, why am I moving to this model? It's because I was locked into an insurance model that basically gave me 10 minutes to see you. And I can't do anything in 10 minutes but prescribe or refer. That's all I can do. So then I had a practice that I thought allowed me to spend an hour with patients in the way that I want to see, to be able to listen to them and take in everything they want to share so I can help them. But that business doesn't work. In the model that we have, and the model that I built with the hospital, it was gonna close. And so the only way I can get out and do what I want to do, and what I think is what's best for patients, is to charge cash. And I understand that's not for everybody, and I don't think everybody should join in. But that became really easy for me because I truly believe it. Like, I could sleep at night, I could tell that story, I could sell it, because it was honest and it was transparent. When
And
it comes to products,
you had done the research in terms of the P&Ls, right? So that's where you gain confidence. Like, say, look, I'm not charging an exorbitant amount. I'm not trying to become a billionaire off of this practice, but you had a sense. So that allowed you to have legitimacy to what you were doing, right?
correct. Yeah. And it's why I don't, belittle anyone who sells packages, as part of their programming. And I think there's obviously wild success stories from patient care in that model. I never went there, and I don't ever intend to go there. The sticker price was just too big for me to sell that. I would have never been comfortable saying it's $4,000 to get in. So I couldn't do that. Some people feel strongly, they're passionate, they see the success, great. Like, don't want to belittle, wasn't for me, right? And then you want to talk about like supplement and lab testing. Again, honest and transparent. I don't really truly care where you get this supplement, but I think this ingredient at this dose is what's best for you. I use Fullscript, and this is me, practitioner. I use Fullscript because I know the quality is there. I know it's been vetted. I know where it's coming from. And I can assure you that what's on the label is in the bottle. You don't have to get this anywhere. Like, I'm a bad salesman when it comes to that, which makes me a good salesman, right? Because it's honest and transparent. My patients appreciate it. I give them every patient gets a 10% discount on my Fullscript account. So, if you can find this somewhere else, and I encourage them, go look on Amazon, just make sure you buy it from the brand store. I still can't assure it's the same quality, but at least it's coming from the brand. But with my discount, it will be less expensive for you. No pressure. When it comes to lab testing, I have never told a patient, you should do this $700 lab test. I show them it's an option. Here's what we would glean from this lab test. We can take a chance at like taking your history and making our best guess and come up with a protocol based on your symptoms and based on the lab testing you've had done. Here's where this would help us. And I think patients appreciate just the honesty. There is no pressure in that. And that's why I didn't do the packages, because again, there's a lot of testing that may happen or I may have done that I just couldn't stand behind, and I couldn't look my patient in the eye and say, here's where this fits in why I think it's valuable. And what you find is most patients do it because of the honesty that approach that you took.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And to your point, I've even gotten to the point in a transparency standpoint, talking to my patients about supplements, is that you actually will benefit our practice financially by purchasing the supplement from us. It's funny because initially I thought, I don't want them, I don't want them to think that we're trying to make money. But then I realized, look, we're able to keep our prices down a little bit more. And if, in our case, we use insurance, right? So we're able to continue to take insurance because you're purchasing supplements, which helps to supplement the fact that we don't get enough from the insurance companies to keep our doors open. So by you doing this, you're helping the practice. And anytime I have shared that with a patient, they're like, oh yeah, I'll buy it from you. I mean, it's just because they want to help support, but that transparency was really interesting.
You're spot on. And I do say that. And actually a couple of years ago, we published a paper on treatment adherence. We did a treatment adherence report. And what do the practitioners who have the highest treatment adherence to their supplement recommendations, what do they do? And by far, the one who was the outlier would say, by purchasing your supplements from me, you support this small business. And again, I love that honest statement because it's true. Like if there's zero revenue on ancillary services, then my P&L says my hourly rate needs to be higher.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I kind of stumbled across that same language, and you may be happy to see, Jeff, that my numbers are trending higher and higher each month. But no, I love this, where you're kind of transparent, on the supplement side of it. And I think the way Fullscript does it is so nice, and in that you have a lot of control over that, right? But again, like, I'm choosing to have a little profit on take the profit on the supplement. I'm the same with labs. I don't, add any additional charges to the labs. And that's the discussion I have. Look, I'm giving you the price that you get at Rupa or wherever, you're going to get it. And, with Fullscripts, if you get it there, you're going to benefit our practice. And I think the reason I like that kind of marriage of those two, distinctions is that, to your point, they can go elsewhere and get supplement. It's hard to go elsewhere and get a lab. You know what I mean? Like,
It's totally right.
So I think it's a fair trade, right? Like, if you want to get it there, you can, it'll help us. If you don't, you still have that opportunity to find it somewhere else.
Yeah. Well, and again, I think, we have endeared ourselves to our patients over this span of time, because when it comes time for treatment planning, I ask if they have a supplement budget in mind. Like, what makes sense for you to pay for supplements on a monthly basis? Now, I've already sort of seen the bags that they brought in, and they're bringing in 30 things, so I know what they're spending now.
Yeah.
And I can now optimize that. I probably can lower your supplement budget with higher quality, more clinically relevant things for you to take. But there's plenty of patients who they saved money or borrowed money from their parents to come see us. That's a 35% discount off supplements. Like, you made the commitment, you saved to get here to really do the best thing for your whole person care, which is work with a provider. I don't want to make anything on the supplement purchase. Like, let me just provide this full discount for you. And that's another tool, to your point, Fullscript allows that per account, you can adjust the discount based on that patient's, what's going on with that patient.
No, absolutely. And one thing I definitely want to ask you before we run out of our time is, so if you charge, for a consultation, per visit, I guess is your model. I've talked to people who have tried that, and then they say, how do you manage the questions that come up after that, right? Because, one of the reasons I like the membership model is I can have lots of touches with my patient of all different sizes, right? They can come in for an hour long in person. They can message me a question. We can have a quick Zoom. And I don't have to worry like, oh my gosh, how much is that worth? How much is that 5 minutes worth, or, for that text? So maybe just help me understand how you sort of reconcile that. And then when do you sort of require them to pay another consultation?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll tell you how we did it and structured it at the outset, and sort of what happens in real life. At the beginning, we chose an EHR that allowed messaging. It was connected to their medical records, so the messaging back and forth was really elegant and simple. And there was an email visit charge, right? So I think we charged $25 at the time for every email interaction. Now, the reality is, I don't want patients who have a question about, like, okay, something simple that took me a minute or two, when they're paying a couple $100s for the visit. So, then it kind of became like, okay, when the email comes in, they sort of come in through the intake process, understanding that email sort of is a charged interaction because you're taking provider time. But if it's quick, easy stuff, we don't charge for that. We now still have an email visit because, and usually, I've got sort of a template at the bottom that I'll click and say, because we were able to save you from coming into the office for an office visit that took 30 to 45 minutes, we're going to apply an email visit charge. And that's worked really good to kind of curb some of that. But I also, my favorite template in my email, you get these long prose emails of what's happened over the weekend and all these pieces. I scan that to make sure there's nothing emergent going on that needs addressed and we need to refer them to an ER or an urgent care. And then I just click the template that says that, my response to this email would just be too complicated. This really requires an in-person visit to address truthfully. Angie's, my staff is available. She'll let you know my next available opening. So the balance works pretty well. And I feel like the quick 1 minute refill stuff, it's not worth nickel and diming, because again, you're going to sort of lose patience when you start doing that.
Sure.
And to me, that's just part of the care model of, paying for the visits. But we've navigated that fairly well, although there's plenty of nights my wife would argue with me that that's the case because she's got too many messages. And she's too nice, right? Because I'm like, Neely, we've got a model that allows you to bill for this and turn it. No, I'll just answer it. So, she sort of falls in the compassionate practitioner who's not necessarily the successful salesperson, but it works.
Can you speak also to the point then? All right, so you have patients come in, you're helping them. A lot of times I don't know if you see this, we certainly see this at our practice. They've been other places, they're not getting the help that they need. So they come to you because they've heard from a friend or somebody, hey, go see Dr. Glad because he'll help you resolve your issue. In your model, what do you think keeps patient retention, right? I mean, they come in, you kind of help fix their gut, they're feeling better now, and now they're back to their primary and they don't see you ever again. Has there been an issue with attrition, or do you find there's a quick turnover? And then my second part of the question is on scheduling. How do you then maintain too those urgent patients you want to get in and see, but if you're booked out for 6 weeks, how do you manage those?
Yeah, those are really great questions. On the churn side, right? Patient gets better and now they don't really see the role for you, nor do they want to pay cash for the visits just to be told, hey, everything's great, keep it going. Although we have plenty of those patients who want to stay on top of their health and do that. I've never actively worked on the churned population because we've just had so much new interest week over week that it really kind of keeps the schedule in balance. And what I've found over 15 years is by delivering remarkable care when they need it, we are always the first call when something goes wrong. And, sort of that distant primary care provider. And I take great pride in that, right? We've lots of patients who moved away or, just worked strictly with their primary care doctor. Things kind of get out of balance. We're the first phone call. Hey, I really need to get back in. And our schedule allows that because we're not hiring a bunch of providers and needing to fill them up and get busy from scratch. So we've been able to have that model work fairly well. I also think,
do you do telemedicine then, or are these all in-person visits?
Yeah, so we do telemedicine as well, and we've done telemedicine almost from the get-go. As a matter of fact, the EHR we had built-in telemedicine, which was one of the first ones I had ever seen back in 2010, which made COVID incredibly easy to stay afloat and stay just as busy, probably busier than ever, right? Because we had, I did seminars for my patient population on every week. What's the update? What am I learning? What does this mean? So we kept our patients engaged, and all of them obviously switched to telemedicine. And what they found was it's an elegant experience when done right at the provider level, right? So I share my screen just as if I'm sitting next to the patient in the office. So the patient felt like they were getting the same experience virtually without having to drive an hour or leave work as they were in the office. And so, I've seen quite a bit of those patients still maintain a virtual care model. I quite frankly have learned I'd rather see a face-to-face. It's more fun. And so we try to encourage more face-to-face, but get it and are available virtually, no problem. From a scheduling standpoint, yeah, this is a tough one, Eric, that we're always trying to navigate because availability is tight. But inevitably what happens is, we always have almost every patient should get lab testing done 2 weeks before their scheduled visit. The reality of that timing working every time is nothing. So there's always fluctuation in the schedule. There's always openings. We do charge a no-show fee if it's 24 hours or inside of 24 hours on the cancellation. But ultimately, that gives our providers time to be open to an urgent need. So we keep an active cancellation list. Assuredly, there's going to be an opening that pops up within a week or two to get those, those not critical, but those more urgent cases in. And it's just sort of worked. So we haven't really had to carve out empty slots to fill in urgent visits.
That's awesome. Thank you. This has been such a great discussion. And I think you've given us a lot of good, as Jeff Bland would say, news to use, in terms of people being able to, you're the first one that's really talked about a consultative style practice, right? Where they're coming in and they're not doing a membership, you're not taking insurance, you're not billing insurance. I think, why don't you just say, just share a little bit. Has there been any legal lessons learned along the way that you may want to share? Because I think sometimes we forget about that aspect of the legal aspects of practicing medicine. Maybe any words of experience?
Yeah, I haven't stepped in anything. There are occasionally, probably one night out of every 6 months, I'll wake up in the middle of the night over like, did we cross state lines? Are we going to get, sort of hand slapped for that? It's that balance of the patients left the state. We've cared for them for 2 or 3 years. They certainly are not going to find this somewhere else. We're going to be upfront with our patients, again, honest and transparent. Like, we're going to continue to manage this, and just know, if you find someone local to you, that's great. I hope you're happy, and we're available for oversight if you need it over time. But other than that, like, what Heal by Practice is great for too, Erica. Like, they always had an attorney on a panel, and so they went through, like, what are the pitfalls? What do you need to make sure of? I think now with ChatGPT, like, it's great for legal opinions. I would not accept it as the end all be all legal opinion, but just to sort of like, hey, here's what I'm thinking I want to do for my practice. Where should I be concerned? This is the state I'm in. It can at least give you some overall guidance. It's like a friend who would never give legal advice, but it's legal advice. But I think finding a good attorney to bounce some things off. I haven't actively engaged one for a while. Every now and then I'll check in on a couple things. There's a couple great ones that are dedicated to integrative and functional practice that are always worth an investment, just to make sure that things are buttoned up. Your intake form is tight. These are things that you really want to make sure the nuts and bolts of getting the practice started are good. But yeah, other than that, I haven't had any significant ones. But again, occasionally there's the lose sleep night here and there.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Well, we're coming up on an hour. Davin, any other questions you want to ask before I kind of give him his final question?
Well, I loved your statement around, staying in patient care, right? Like, even if you decide to kind of do other things. And so maybe just your final comments would just be around the balance, right? And maybe, is there one you prefer, or is it just nice having the complementary roles of, being a technology entrepreneur, and seeing patients?
Yeah, I see myself more as technology entrepreneur these days. I've learned so much. Like, when I was new to FullScript in 2019, it was my first, corporate role, being a part of a very legitimate and growing business. And kept my ears open, asked questions from people that I wasn't sure about, like, how are you thinking about this? But now I've just been exposed to so much of, how a company works, how you run a successful large company. The team I have at FullScript is incredibly inspiring, from the top to the very bottom. They're all amazing people. So I don't, like, I always see myself as that's kind of my home now. I never want to leave patient care. Like, it grounds me. It brings me back to the roots. And what I'm blessed to sort of share is, when I made the transition to be full-time at FullScript, because I was half and half for a year and a half. And I sort of went through my schedule over the last year and said, okay, here's the 200 patients that I really like to stay in touch with. Again, honest and transparent email. I feel called to go work at FullScript full time. I think there's a huge opportunity for me. We're growing this movement, but I still want to maintain, my role as your provider. But my schedule is going to juggle. I travel a lot. I'm going to have meetings that land on my schedule. And so if you'll ride this sort of bumpy scheduling road with me, would love to continue to take care of you. And over time, that scheduling transition some patients, it's just not, they don't like it. And we have other providers for them, and that's worked really well. But most of the patients now, after 4 years of doing that, they just know, right? Like when they schedule an appointment with me, it's a 50% proposition that we're going to do it that day. But I'll open up an extra day. Like I never want anybody to wait a month when they were sort of expected to review labs and understand. So I'll usually carve out the time to see them. I can't tell you how many times, whether, new people come on at Fullscript, they just respect and appreciate me more because I'm still seeing patients. I'm in big meetings with health systems and, national provider networks, and just they're so happy that I'm still seeing patients and that I can still relate to the journey of the practitioner. I'd like neither Fullscript nor myself would ever take that away from just what I have and what it brings, what I can bring to the company.
No, I love that. I recall back to my days as CMIO, and I couldn't agree more with that statement of just the credibility that it brings to say that you're still in the trenches, helping people do. And I think it probably speaks to your why. I think it probably connects you back to your why, and Fullscript is letting you do a bigger version of that why, but it still keeps you rooted in it. And I think that's great.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Well, here's your final question. And I think because of your unique opportunity with Fullscript, you're probably keeping an eye on the market trends for integrative and functional medicine. So I'd kind of like you to share a little bit about what you're seeing, but also then wax a little prophetic for us. Let us, what do you see the future of integrative and functional medicine doing in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, one of the biggest market trends, and any clinician knows, is just the huge focus that's happening direct to the consumer. And the health washing of the influencer crowd and the podcast crowd, and the ability to sort of let patients think that they can manage this themselves, right? Get your lab panels done. We'll interpret this. Keep your dashboard here. Get your supplements. And that is so prevalent across all of healthcare. I think as we continue to arm more providers, patients get down everyone sort of takes that journey, and always, sometimes it's further along the journey and sometimes right at the beginning, I sure wish I had a provider to help me. Like they just are limited, and naturally, right? They didn't study, they don't work with patients. And so the more practitioners we can just sort of accept that that's happening and be open to the patient who comes to you. I've heard too many stories of patients showing up at doctors' offices with their, the labs that they had interpreted and did themselves and being turned away.
Right.
Like, no, that's an opportunity for you to be the expert because they're coming to you for help. So the more we can arm the practitioner to meet the patients where they are, they're more advanced, right? They've already been on a gluten-free diet for a year, and they've already been on the 3 supplements that you were going to recommend in the first visit. Step your game up and learn more, or listen better, or understand their history better, because they still need us. And Fullscript is really dedicated to that movement. Like, we do not sell direct to patient, and we have no intention to. We want to be the provider tool and their clinical tool. And we're bringing more evidence into the platform. We're bringing more knowledge about, lab interpretation and understanding when to use labs and why, because we want to be part of that movement of growing this huge practitioner base that patients are going to continue to need. AI is the next front, right? Not only are they getting an interpretation of labs, but they're running everything through ChatGPT, and they're getting a pretty decent interpretation and a good starting point. So we have to be better at how to take that to another level and be the human in relationship with that patient. So I don't see our movement doing anything but growing, and that opportunity continues to be very right for practitioners who feel stuck maybe in a conventional model and being asked to see 30 patients a day and not getting to really connect with patients that they want. That patient base continues to grow, that demand continues to grow, and we've got to solve the supply side. So I think the next 10 to 15 years are incredibly exciting by just continuing to, spread this message to providers listening, see more fellowships pop up, and really be able to take on that, sort of more intelligent patient. But you still have a huge number of patients who aren't ready yet. And, it's going to start trickling down, and they're going to start wondering, like, okay, what is this, whole person care? What is this integrative functional approach? Any clinician who steps out and does this is going to be incredibly busy.
Love that. Wow, this has been.
I have one more answer to your speed round, because I saw the agenda ahead of the podcast. You were asking for my favorite quote.
Yes.
And the quote I have taken with me, and hopefully it shines through in my story. When I was a really crappy business solo practitioner, we had all this, outstanding accounts receivable. We weren't collecting copays. It was just all this stuff. And the Indiana Academy of Family Physicians brought on a business consultant to speak at like the Indianapolis State Seminar. And he said, he's talking about like, okay, everything I'm going to teach you is not going to be comfortable for you. But the one rule I want you to take is ready, fire, aim. And that I've carried through everything I've done, right? And that's the one piece that, the practitioners listening here, they're fired up, they're ready to do this, and then reality hits and they don't do it, right? All three of us have talked to these providers, and they're going to more and more conferences, they're getting another fellowship, they're adding more letters to their last name, but they're still stuck in the practice that doesn't make them happy. So jump. And then you can figure stuff out. And that even goes to just like business decisions, like just do it and then see how it works. Now I've seen that in a tech company, right? You call it A/B testing, right? Well, let's just do a pilot. Let's take a small number of practitioners. Let's turn on a feature and let's see if it works. It's that kind of mindset that we need to carry as practitioners and entrepreneurs, to just do something. Don't just continue to be frustrated by the system, and instead do something about it.
Love it. Yeah, I would definitely say that that's been a consistent theme across the individuals that we have interviewed so far. That, all of us have basically said, all right, we're ready to do something different, but we're not going to sit on our laurels and wait for that opportunity to come. We start going after it and we start making something happen. And in the process, we get better at aiming what the target is, right? We refine it down into what we really, really want it to be, but it doesn't usually start off that way.
Yeah, well, I think I think the influencer is not a great model for inspiration, right? Like, I'm going to go be Mark Hyman, or I'm going to be like so and so. Like, that started really small for them too. Mm-hmm. And so go crush it in your community and stay local and sort of build what you represent and build your brand, if you will. Then maybe you can go outside those walls. But I think too many people start with this, like, I'm going to get 1 million followers. Like, yeah, I'm going to be a telemedicine practitioner for the country. Yeah, just go crush it in your community. Like then maybe, but you'll be really happy just being a rock star in your community.
Perfect. Love that. Well, thank you very much. If people want to learn more about Jeff Glad, where can they go?
Well, they want to learn about me. GladMD.com is the clinic website, but hit me up on LinkedIn is where I would love to engage. And as I mentioned, that's how this all starts. Reach out, if you have questions, if you're interested in what we're doing at Fullscript, would love to talk to you about that too.
Awesome. Love it. Well, thanks, Jeff. It's been an awesome interaction. And I think people are going to really be excited about this podcast. So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. We'll see you guys real soon.
Thank you.